This week, we explored some of the actors that make up global society and play a key role in development and globalization agendas. Exploring the relationship between these different actors helps us to understand how social forces collide and intersect with each other on a global stage. I find the image of the blind scholars and the elephant to be especially useful. While Steger uses this image to talk about the different dimensions of globalization, it's also helpful to think of the same type of image when viewing the various actors that intersect in a global society. Today, we'll look at two additional global actors: intergovernmental organizations or multilateral institutions, and transnational corporations. Multilateral institutions are organizations formed when three or more nations work together on issues related to all members in that organization. Sometimes they're known as intergovernmental organizations. They can be international or regional, and they often address key issues related to development and globalization. Some of the most powerful and primary multilateral institutions today include the United Nations, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, also known as the IMF, the World Trade Organization, as well as powerful regional development banks, such as the Inter-American Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, or the African Development Bank. For many people, the most important and most powerful multilateral institution is the United Nations. The United Nations was founded in 1945 after World War II, and it's currently made up of 193 member states. It provides a forum for members to express views related to international issues and aims to be a mechanism for governments to find areas of agreement and solve problems together. Although its primary purpose was to maintain international peace and security, the United Nations also serves to develop friendly relations among nations, to achieve international cooperation in solving global problems, and to be a center or place for these harmonizing actions to occur. Some of the issues the UN is involved in include peace and security, climate change, sustainable development, human rights, disarmament, terrorism, humanitarianism and health emergencies, gender equality, governance, and food production. In the assigned reading for this week on multilateral institutions, the authors outline several other important multilateral institutions, their primary purpose, as well as some critiques of them. If you recall, the World Bank's primary purpose is to lend funds to developing nations. The International Monetary Fund, or IMF, regulates the market. It also provides lending to member countries, regardless of whether the nation is developing or developed. Regional development banks focus on regional issues, either of the members of that development bank or the donors that provide funds to the development bank. The United Nations Development Program, or UNDP, provides grants that don't have to be repaid to struggling nations. However, funding is always an issue at the UNDP. And finally, the reading looked at the World Trade Organization that regulates trade on a global scale, and many have argued ensures a continuation of neoliberal policy. We'll be talking much more about neoliberalism in Module 4B, But for our purposes today, it's important to recognize that neoliberalism is a set of economic policies based on classical liberal ideas that view the market as self regulating. We'll be talking much more about neoliberalism in Module 4b. But for our purposes today, it's important to recognize that neoliberalism is a set of economic policies based on classical liberal ideas that view the market as self regulating. We cannot discuss multilateral institutions without exploring power dynamics and inequality. Not all members of these institutions have the same voice. For example, in the World Bank and IMF, nations that give the most money have the most power. In fact, in the World Bank, nations that give the most money, which is typically the United States, get the most voting shares. This varies in regional development banks. The United Nations Development Program is slightly different. In this institution, each member gets one vote. However, the World Trade Organization is absolutely dominated by Western voices, Western power, and Western nations. No discussion of global actors would be complete without exploring the role of transnational corporations. Coca-Cola, Nike, ExxonMobil, and Walmart are some of the most powerful transnational corporations today. The vast majority of transnational corporations have headquarters in the US or Europe, and none of the largest 200 transnational corporations have headquarters outside North America, Europe, China, Japan, South Korea, or Mexico. Transnational corporations control much of the world's investment capital, technology, and access to international markets. They're extremely powerful players in the world's economic arena. However, they're increasingly shaping global politics, culture, environmental, and ideological agendas that impact development and globalization.